Hello, The Spill is moving to its own YouTube channel and we're taking all of the celebrity drama and pop culture deep dives with us. So click here to subscribe so you don't miss our daily entertainment news updates.
From Mamamia, welcome to The Spill, your daily pop culture fix. I'm Ksenia Lukic.
And I'm Taylor Strano.
So today, Laura and Em are off having a wonderful adventure. So Taylor and I thought we would take you through some of our favourite documentaries. We are going to steer clear from true crime. The reason is because The Spill did a episode on true crime docos last year. If you want to check that out, we'll pop it in the show notes for you so you can go and have a listen to that after you listen to our recommendations. But yeah, we're going to try and stay in the slightly less murdery section of the documentary universe.
True crime is just one of those subjects, and maybe it's what happens when you work in the news and you just see all the awful things happening. But true crime is one of those things that is a weak spot or a blind spot for me. So I know you're upset, Ksenia. I am very thankful that's not what we're doing today.
I mean, the great thing about a doco, I'm like such a history buff. I love a documentary, memoirs, all of that stuff. It's always just like my default when it comes to watching.
Oh, I completely agree with you. The thing that I love about documentaries and docu-series is that you can go as big and broad as you want or as niche and like really zero in on a topic. Like anything from organized religion or like a post-rock obscure band. Like both those documentaries exist. Ksenia, while I was doing research for this topic, I was like, what is the most niche documentary that exists in the world? I found one, and I'm sure that you and I will be as equally excited about it. It's from 2007. It's a documentary called Helvetica. And yes, it is an entire documentary about the Helvetica typeface.
I love that. I would so be into that. Do you know one that I did kind of pitch that got knocked down really far because it makes me seem like I'm 80 years old was this 10-part Vietnam War documentary.
I was
like,
that.
No one's going to watch that. It was like a Ken, but I was like, it's a really good documentary for into history. But Taylor, why don't you get started with your first pick?
Okay, so my first pick comes from 2009. It's directed and produced by RJ Cutler. It's the September issue. Do those words mean anything to you, Ksenia?
They absolutely do. You're speaking to a fashion girly.
Oh, I'm so glad, and I'll try and hold my own in this conversation. The September issue, of course, is the documentary around putting together the September issue of Vogue. Now, for folks who don't know, the reason that is such an important issue that comes out every year for Vogue, September kind of signifies like the end of financial year. September in the fashion world is the new calendar year for fashion. It's a big deal. It's the biggest issue they put out every year. And the 2007 edition of Vogue was like the largest they'd ever published at that point. It weighed like pounds, I think like 5 pounds, and was like 850 pages or something ridiculous like that. The other important thing is who's going to be on the cover of that issue, right? Because it's the most sought after, it's the most popular issue. Do you remember who was on the cover of 2007 September Vogue, Ksenia?
Not off the top of my head.
I can't believe you can't recall that. It's Kirsten Dunst, who at the time was promoting her film Marie Antoinette.
Which is actually kind of perfect. And, we see in this documentary a lot of the behind the scenes of Anna Wintour and like how she runs her empire, I suppose. But September as well, for America, September is New York Fashion Week. So again, another really important month for fashion.
I love that this documentary, like you said there, it's about Anna Wintour. It's this woman who still to this day, I think, remains quite an elusive and mysterious figure. And yes, she is now stepping down from the head of Vogue, but she'll still be playing an overall part, obviously, in our fashion world. I love that this documentary gave us like unbridled access to her and her team as well. Like people who feature in this documentary, Andre Leon Talley, may he rest in peace. Vera Wang, Karl Lagerfeld makes an appearance, and of course, her right-hand woman, Grace Cottingham, as well. Up until this point, I don't think we really saw much of Anna Wintour. She wasn't really known as a media tart. She didn't really do the rounds. Up till now, like in present day, she's been on some talk shows. We know little bits more about her. But this documentary, the September issue, was really for the first time for a lot of people getting at that behind the scenes of the glossy facade that is Vogue magazine.
It's also quite interesting if you don't have any experience in that fashion world to see how shows and magazines and how that all comes together. I actually, despite the fact that have always sort of been involved, have actually never seen the documentary, which is kind of sacrilege for me. I think because around that time I was a bit younger, obviously, and I was modeling at the time, and I feel like I was a bit traumatized by the whole industry that I just didn't want to have anything to do with it. But it's a really interesting insight into how magazines and fashion had worked back then. But magazines are kind of dead now, unfortunately.
You're right. It's like this snow globe preservation of the early 2000s in fashion, which, like you said, not necessarily the nicest of times, especially for people who were working in that industry. But something that I hazard a guess probably hasn't actually changed that much in present day. Maybe this is one for you to watch when you're ready, Ksenia, and you can report back to me what you think.
Yeah, I feel like maybe I'm ready now. I'm old and don't model anymore, so it's like it's way past it. But those sorts of things I was always very like just didn't want to touch it. But I do like it in retrospect now.
Very good. Okay, tell me, what is the first documentary or docu-series that you're bringing?
Okay, so I am going to do something that is 100% not really very me, and that is The Last Dance, which is the Michael Jordan docu-series from 2020. Now, I do not play sports. I am not a sports person. I am not an athlete by any means. I flail around. I am so unathletic.
Ksenia, like spillers, not that this makes any difference to you or to Ksenia, but Ksenia is like this tall, like, you like built like an athlete, man. What do you mean? I'm so surprised by that.
Everybody was always like, oh, can you play tennis? Can you play volleyball? I'm like, no, I cannot do sports. I'm so uncoordinated. Shocking. But the reason why I love this docuseries is because not only does it talk a lot about, Michael Jordan's rise as an athlete and the major season in 97-98 for the Chicago Bulls, it talks about his rise as a cultural icon in the 90s and early 2000s. So the reason why I loved it so much was not really the sports side of it, like the Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman stuff. It was more the Nike deal. It was the fandom surrounding it, like global fandom. I owned a Chicago Bulls t-shirt when I was a teenager, having not even known the rules of basketball.
I love, this is the beautiful thing about documentaries, right? We can both take different things and appreciate it for different reasons. Like, I remember when this came out, like you said, 2020, we were in the middle of lockdown. There wasn't much going on. So my partner and I, who are both sport fanatics, like NBA is always on in our house when it's NBA season. When this came out, we were so excited. We just had something new to talk about that wasn't the horrific news that was going on. So tell me, what is it about this documentary that still sticks with you now?
The one thing that sticks out the most is the Nike deal and Space Jam.
Interesting. Well, yeah, Space Jam is such an integral part of our childhoods.
And also just how it kind of crossed sport into the mainstream. And I think this is why it's really good that both of us like this, because the reason I like it is because it became a cultural phenomenon. You like it because you love NBA. So, I was looking at this deal. So the initial deal that he made with Nike, what we find out is he was offered a blanket deal, like a lump sum, which is often what was done with athletes. And then they offered him royalties of each shoe sold, which is still in place to this day.
Which was never heard of before. Like you signed a deal, you got a lump sum, and then you moved on.
That was it. But he got these royalties. Now, to this day, he still makes, according to Forbes, an estimated $130 million a year from Nike and Air Jordans.
How good's that?
That is insane. And he was so young when this deal was made.
I will say the one thing from The Last Dance that folks maybe aren't aware of is this, I would say it's a very sanitized version of MJ. His company, Jump 23, were actually the production partners, so he didn't serve as an executive producer or anything, but his media company was there, throughout the whole process. And of course, they had significant input into how the series was created and the direction that it took. And so it does paint him in a relatively good light for people who will remember. That's not necessarily the way Michael Jordan is remembered by other people. Famously, Luke Longley, who is actually an Australian basketballer, was in that Chicago Bulls team, and he was not contacted for comment in this documentary. And I think there's a pretty glaring reason that may be.
Okay, so I don't know that, but I do know that he had final approval on what was
exactly
shown. Like he basically was allowed to say no to anything that wasn't sort of in a positive light. We saw a little bit of the Dennis Rodman stuff. Dennis Rodman was in my zeitgeist when I was younger as well, because he had the crazy hair and the piercings.
And he dated Madonna.
He dated Madonna. He dated Carmen Electra. Like, he was, really in my... And then, of course, Space Jam. Like, one of the best movies ever made. I was a massive Looney Tunes fan. And so this movie really hit my household. Like, my older brother and I watched this movie all the time.
100%. I think that's like maybe the first film that I watched where animation and real life clashed in a film, and my little brain was wigging out. Like, I had no idea how that was even possible. So yeah, I love that The Last Dance is a culmination for both of us from very different places about like a really fun sport watch.
What did you take away from it? What was your main takeaway?
I think that it's a good reflection of the time, and this is the great thing about docos, right? Like, hindsight is 2020. We can reflect upon something that happened years in the past and think about, like, was it actually good or give some analysis about something that's past. I thought it was a good documentary. It was really interesting to see that team connection between like Pippen and Rodman and Michael Jordan. Also, the coach as well is a really interesting person and plays a pretty integral role in this doco. If you haven't seen it yet, Phil Jackson is like this new age spiritual guru. So for nothing else, it was just like wish fulfillment for a sport fan.
Love that. Okay. Taylor, your next one.
Okay, this next one I present to you, Ksenia, is not necessarily one documentary, but one documentary filmmaker. I'm, of course, talking about Louis Theroux.
I love him so much. I'm so excited. Because you refused to show me your picks before all of this, and I was really upset because I hate secrets.
Yes, I knew that this would be your reaction, because who doesn't love Louis Theroux, right? That's his whole shtick. The reason that I love him, and I'm sure that you can agree, is he is so disarming and he gets away with asking these really tough or at times just like very direct, borderline rude questions of what can be quite volatile people.
And, he's doing a podcast now, but I mean, he's been doing documentaries with the BBC for a very, very long time. Probably his most famous one's the Westboro Baptist Church one. Is that the one that you're kind of...
Yeah. So I've got a list. So The Most Hated Family in America, which is what you're talking about, came out in 2007. Yeah. But like you said, he's been doing this for years, like since the 90s, when Weird Weekends with Louis Theroux would air on the BBC. And every weekend we'd jump into a little subculture or a little niche group of people doing something weird in the world. Other ones that I absolutely love is Louis and the Nazis and My Scientology movie. When Scientology was that big breaking thing, we had lots of documentaries around that, but My Scientology movie was maybe one of the best to pull it off, because again, it goes back to that thing that Louis Theroux was so good at. He asked these really direct questions that you're almost like, oh God, like they're not even going to answer it. They're just going to punch him in the face. And he gets away with it. Yeah.
And I love a Scientology documentary. Going Clear's great. But his one is good, just the way that he goes about it. I also love, one of my favorite ones is the porn industry one. And then he does a follow-up with the performers like 10 years later or something to see where they're at, which is absolutely fascinating. But, I mean, every single one of them is fantastic because – and you're so right, it is his interview style. It's the way he is able to ask those difficult questions in this almost awkward, uncomfortable way that gets the actual answer.
I will say I've read his memoir and he's very aware of what he's doing. And even still, the world over, we know that that's his style. We know what to expect from him now. But people are still lured into, it's almost like a bit of a charm offensive, I would say, from Louis Theroux. I love it. I love that there's no assumed knowledge on his behalf. He goes into everything. Although I'm sure he's very heavily researched, he goes in with that assumption of being completely new to a topic and that it really is an opportunity for audiences as well. We get brought these like serious or maybe even like taboo subjects like porn or like America's Hardest Prisons or Scientology. And it gets brought to us, the masses, who maybe would otherwise have like these preconceived ideas about them. He kind of rules that all out and starts from scratch.
Yeah, he's also, it doesn't make those initial judgments that I think a lot of people do, which is really hard in an environment where you obviously disagree with the way people do things. I think the Most Hated Family in America is probably the best example of that, and is able to still create a relationship with them without passing judgment, which is really challenging as a journalist to do. But yeah, great one, Taylor. Yeah, if you haven't watched the old, Weird Weekends with Louis Theroux, you have to.
By the way, if you've ever been on TikTok and you've heard that Louis Theroux rap,
wiggle, wiggle.
Wiggle, wiggle. Yeah. That's where that comes from. It comes from Weird Weekends. Okay, Ksenia, lay it on me. What's your next one?
Okay, so I did kind of break my own rules and not do fully true crime, but I did dabble in the cultish.
Oh, I can do cult. I feel like there's a distinction between cult and true crime. I'm in for a cult doco.
Okay. There's something about cults that gets me hooked every single time. I have a huge list of cult documentaries. If you ever want to ask me, I will give you my favorite list. So DM me. But the one that I want to bring up, because I feel like it's also kind of sport related, is Bikram, Yoga Guru Predator.
That was a lot of words.
Do you want me to say it again? Bikram, Yoga Guru Predator.
Okay, got it. Moving on. Yes.
Have you watched this?
No.
Okay. So this is from 2019 and it follows the story of Bikram Chandri, who created the Bikram yoga practice. Now, do you know anything about Bikram yoga?
I'm so glad you asked. I didn't realize that was a person's name.
Yes. So in the 1970s, Bikram created this particular practice of Bikram yoga. Now, he trademarked this practice, which is the first time that anyone's done this in the yoga world. And he was kind of criticized for it because yoga itself is an ancient practice, and trademarking these 26 postures plus 2 exercises is kind of weird. So,
sorry, this is not like hot yoga, right? That's a different thing again.
It is hot yoga. So
it is.
Bikram yoga consists of 26 poses and 2 breathing exercises, one at the beginning and one at the end. And it's the same every single time. It's also done in a 40-degree room and it's a 90-minute class. It's quite a challenging class. I got really, really into it in the early 2010s. I loved doing Bikram. Now, it became super, super popular. Like Madonna was doing it. He apparently helped Richard Nixon cure some disease or whatever. This documentary follows not just the practice itself and the teacher courses, it also explores the allegations of sexual assault and cult-like behavior during teacher training sessions.
Oh, Ksenia. You had me at stretching and you had me at warm rooms and you lost me at sexual assault.
I know. So allegedly, we have to say that because he has never been convicted of anything criminally.
Interesting. Spoilers.
Yeah. So it is a movie. It's an hour and a half long, so it's not super hard to sort of get into. It is on Netflix as well. Now, his teacher trainings, I actually looked into doing a teacher training. Now, the majority of this documentary is focused around the teacher training courses, which were absolutely brutal. They cost about $10,000 for a 9-week course, and he was intense. And they have all of this footage of these sessions. And they're all packed in like sardines. They're doing this yoga. He's walking around in these little Speedos. He sits on a throne.
Oh.
It's very like, I'm the king.
Noted.
And The allegations against him started coming out in 2013. So relatively recently. Now, there were always whispers about his behavior early on, but I think probably around that Me Too movement is when people started to feel more comfortable to come forward, because this guy was making a ton of money off this trademark. Because Bikram, if you owned a Bikram studio, you had to be properly licensed by Bikram Chandri. So he was driving around in Rolls Royces, he had a Rolex, he's very flamboyant, huge personality. And the documentary basically looks at what went on behind the scenes. Now, as I said, there are some sexual assault allegations against him, and I won't give a spoiler away. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler, but it's not the ending that we really want, is all I'll say. But the reason I brought it up is because I had no idea, like what you said, I didn't know the background behind Bikram yoga before this documentary. All I knew was it was 26 postures. I always used to do it. I didn't know anything about him specifically. Like, I knew he was the one that created, I'm using quotation marks, created, because again, yoga is an ancient practice. Each of these postures have been used within the yoga sphere for a very long time, but the sequence of poses is what he trademarked. Fascinating guy, and it kind of leans into that cult territory and goes into the power that he had over his pupils.
It's so interesting, right? Because I too love a cult documentary. And what do we know about cults is there's usually one or two very charismatic leaders. Everybody buys into the same belief system or practice or whatever it may be that they're peddling. Ksenia, you were going to become a yoga teacher, which I love for you. What stopped you from doing it?
It was like, honestly, it was such a fleeting thought. I literally Googled it. I could barely touch my toes. I was never going to be a yoga teacher.
Oh, this is like the time that I wanted to be a flight attendant, but then I realized that I don't love flying.
Yeah, it was just like a fleeting thing. I looked it up once. It was never a serious thing that I was going to do, but it was when I was going to this particular studio like twice a week. And then that ended 3 months later because I have no attention span. But it's a fascinating documentary. He is a really, really big personality, and it's quite shocking. And it made me never want to do Bikram again.
And she never walked into a hot room again. If you have seen Bikram, or if you're about to jump on that train, may I also recommend watching Wild Wild Country, which is another great cult documentary. What is it about these cult leaders and bloody Rolls Royces and Rolexes? Like, it's so antithetical.
It's so interesting how they will often be preaching this like community lifestyle, and then they're flashing all this money. It's very bizarre. In the same way, I think my other favorite cult documentary, we're not going to go down a massive rabbit hole because I'm going to get in trouble, but my other favorite is anything on the FLDS and Warren Jeffs.
Yeah, totally. Because
that man is an absolute sicko.
Yeah. That's the best way to describe him, yes.
Revolting man. But yes, cults, fascinating subject.
Okay, shall we I don't even know how to move on? Yeah, I don't even know how to transition into my final reco.
How do we transition from Warren Jeffs
to cult of personality, I want to say.
Ooh.
Here we go. Look out. Let's see if I can back that up. Okay. I want to talk about the greatest party that never happened. That is the title of the 2019 Netflix documentary, Fyre, The Greatest Party That Never Happened. Ksenia, do you remember in like late 2016, early 2017, Instagram influencers, models, celebrities started posting these orange tiles on Instagram?
I know exactly which one you're talking about. There's two of them around the same festival.
There is. So I'm talking specifically about Netflix's documentary. The other doco that you're referring to is Fyre Fraud, and both of them center on what was the meteoric rise and then chaotic downfall of the Fyre Festival, aka the greatest party that never happened. What started out was a guy named Billy McFarland. He wanted to promote his new artist booking app, Fyre app, and he thought, what better way to do it than to throw the most exclusive music festival in the world. He bought an island, or he rented out an island that they kept telling us was Pablo Escobar's island. People were spending like ridiculous money to come to this music festival. They were promised artists like Blink-182 and these like luxurious accommodation on this beautiful island in the Bahamas. Cut a long story short, it was all like a crock of shit, basically. It didn't exist. These artists were never booked in. And where the documentary picks up is what happens when people who paid tickets, who sold all of their possessions to go to this party, what happens when they arrive at the island. That's where the documentary starts.
Yeah, and, you know, they're sleeping in like tents, eating cheese sandwiches. There's no water. There's no plumbing. Like, it was a complete and utter disaster.
I'm glad that you bring up the cheese bread, because I literally have the note here. The photo of the cheese on bread that went viral was the beginning of the end. So people were so jealous of like the wealthy and the elite and people who could afford to go to this festival. And they were like, they'd drawn the ire of netizens everywhere, right? Because everybody wanted to be a part of this. Everybody bought into the hype and the fame. And then when we started to slowly get these images, like you said, no running water, FEMA tents were popping up, which is like what they give people in disaster relief. Like if you've ever seen a hurricane situation in the US, these are the tents that they put people in who've been displaced because their houses have been ripped apart by the wind. These tents were popping up. There were mattresses being soaked in the rain. Again, like none of these artists had been booked. Like Blink-182, I think, had to go on the record and be like, hey, no idea what's going on here. By the way, one of our members hates flying, so that was just never going to happen. The reason that I love this documentary in particular is because they get to speak to the people who were involved, right? So they speak to Billy McFarland, who eventually like was convicted of wire fraud and connection to the failed festival, who, by the way, like still maintains that it was great, and I think he actually attempted to do a Fyre 2.0. They also speak to Ja Rule, who was the other person involved in this, which is just actually crazy. And then Andy King, who became like the unsung hero viral meme to come out of the whole Fyre Festival debacle. Do you remember the water bottle story?
That's why I brought up the water bottles.
Bless his soul. I mean, he was involved in a terrible thing, but still.
Yeah, he basically offered to give a sexual favour in return for water bottles.
Because that's
taking one for the team.
Like, that's the level of pressure that the people on this team were under. Like, they just were fed this lie. And then eventually people started to cotton on that, like, maybe the organiser wasn't all he was cracked up to be. Maybe this was all a bit of a hoax, but they were too deep at this point. It's like watching that car crash moment where you're like, oh, something bad's going to happen.
Yeah.
But we're so far in it now, we've just got to see it through.
I think also the reason that this kind of was such a cultural moment was because all of these celebrities had backed it and were paid to post about it. So, you know, he had hired all these models like Kylie, Kendall Jenner, like all of these people were involved in posting for this festival. And then they get the backlash because they're like, why would you promote something when you showed us this like crazy experience and it wasn't like that at all? So it kind of brought in a lot of other celebrities into the, you know,
firing line,
into the mix. What I think is also interesting and there was a bit of crossover between Billy and Anna Delvey.
Yeah, talk more on that. Did you know that? Tell us more about that.
So Anna Delvey, if you don't know, she's the other wonderful fraudster who pretended that she was a millionaire heiress. There is a doco on her. There's a movie on her. Like they've done bits on her on SNL and a podcast, which is also great. And she basically conned people into thinking she was very, very wealthy and skipped from hotel to hotel, never paying bills, promising people she'd pay money back. But for some reason, she crossed over with Billy while he was planning Fyre Festival and slept on his couch or something, or slept in a spare room in his house or something. But yeah, funny little crossover of two fraudsters.
Yeah, I hate that, to be honest. But I mean, do I expect nothing less from, like, is there like a fraud meetup in New York City group? Because I feel like they would be the two people I would expect to see there.
Honestly, New York I lived in New York in 2013 and the vibe there is like promoters was such a, like I would get promoters stopping me on the street being like, you need to come to this club with me or you need to, like it was that is like the vibe of what New York was like in that scene as well. And Billy, I think just ran with the whole I'm really cool and everything's exclusive, I'm exclusive, just pretending the whole time until it all came crashing down.
Yeah, hard agree with you. Fyre, the greatest party that never happened. It's on Netflix. Also check out Fyre Fraud as well. All right, Ksenia, bring us home. What's your final reco?
All right, I'm going to keep this one tight and I'm going to end it on a really heartwarming, lovely note, and it is the Oscar-winning My Octopus Teacher from 2020.
Okay, when you say those words, what comes to mind is the Wiggles, the octopus from the Wiggles. I don't think that's what it's about, though.
It's not about Henry the Octopus.
Okay.
It's also a movie. It won the Oscar in 2021 for Best Documentary Feature. So it centers around Craig Foster. Now, he lives in South Africa and he starts doing some free diving in this sort of kelp forest. And on one of his expeditions, he meets this little octopus. And then he starts visiting her every single day. And he starts finding out her strategies. He sees how intelligent she is. He sees how she, camouflages herself from predators. She uses utensils to hide behind. She uses them to crack, like very, very, very intelligent creatures, octopuses. Octopi.
Plural.
Octopi.
Yeah.
Plural, octopi, octopus, singular. And as over the course of a year, he kind of develops a relationship with this octopus. And she comes up to him and she starts like interacting with him and like touching him and exploring his face. And she recognizes him. She knows who he is. And it's really important to note at the beginning of this documentary, Craig is not in a good place mentally. He is really struggling with his life and feeling really lost. And the end of the story, it's a really beautiful story about, being in touch with nature and, that connection with nature. It also encouraged me to never eat octopus again because I cannot believe how incredibly intelligent these creatures are. Have you seen those videos of octopi opening like jars and things like that?
No, but I have seen the videos of them like predicting major sport and world events.
Okay, I think we're on different sides of the internet.
I love that this documentary, Ksenia, is equal parts environment documentary, which I love that you've been able to slide in because I was never going to be the person to recommend David Attenborough, although I do think he's fantastic. I love that it's equal parts environment and nature documentary, but also like it's a story of connection in an unlikely place.
Absolutely. And this was released in 2020, again, during the pandemic. Neither of us brought up Tiger King, and I think that was on purpose. But 2020 was a great time for documentaries. But yeah, this it's a really beautiful, heartwarming, like feel-good documentary. And you're right, it is about that sort of connection with nature and how important that is for humans. Have you ever heard of the term grounding?
Mm-hmm.
It's a good grounding doco. Go put your feet in some dirt and like experience nature.
Yeah. Look at an octopus.
Yeah.
If you learn nothing else from this episode, look at an octopus, think twice
or
about
octopi
and think twice about Bikram yoga.